So nobody better to talk to than Chris Biderman of the Sacramento Bee. He has been on the road with the Kings for this entire road trip and spoke with De'Aaron Fox yesterday.
This morning.
Chris, this morning.
Yeah.
Chris, welcome in.
Thank you.
Your article is available at sacb.com. What I guess before we get into what De'Aaron had to say, what are your thoughts on this trade buzz speculation?
Yeah.
Rumor?
I don't think it's very complicated, right? Like I think it's been widely reported, and Fox has said as much, that like he told the team that he wanted to see where it would go this season when he declined the 3-year extension over the summer. And you know, the team has not made improvement. He wanted the team to improve the roster, right? He wanted them to be in the playoffs and not in the play-in mix. So they haven't done that yet. He's said that he really wants organizational stability. Well, the team fired its head coach, a head coach that Fox liked, and then when Mike Brown was fired, no one in the organization publicly spoke and took some of the, I guess, onus off Fox's shoulders. Fox had to answer a bunch of questions about, you know, whether or not he pushed Mike Brown out, and you know, I've reported and other people have reported that it was not accurate, that Fox really had anything to do with Mike Brown's firing, and that it was pretty sudden. But no one from the organization has come out and had Fox's back. So I think from that standpoint, it's pretty simple. Like Fox has said, look, I want these things to happen. Those things have not happened. And then Mike Brown got fired, and De'Aaron Fox, you know, I think wrongly took some of the brunt of that. And then here we are. Like it's the trade deadline. And I think Fox basically confirmed today that, you know, the team's fielding calls, and that there's a real possibility that he gets dealt before the deadline. So I think it's very complicated for the Kings. I don't think it's super complicated for De'Aaron Fox.
Interesting. So by not complicated for Fox, you mean like, I mean, like, look, I've been around him for a long time. He's very cut and dry, right?
Yeah.
Like he's very matter of fact, and like his understanding is pretty clear. Like they didn't do X, Y, and Z. They put me in a bad situation. Is there any way to back that up? Is there any way to fix this thing now? Or did you get the sense from him like, no, this is heading towards a bad breakup right now?
Yeah, I mean, I asked him if there was anything that could be done that could make him want to sign with the Kings long term or stick it out beyond the deadline, and he said, you know, anything can happen. You know, crazier things have happened in the league. He said that twice. And you know, De'Aaron, like when he's not super eager to dive into the minutia of a subject, he will give you sort of short platitude answers, which he did, but they were revealing in a sense that, you know, him saying he wouldn't be surprised if he got dealt, or him saying anything's possible, essentially, in terms of the Kings being able to potentially make a move that would want him to stay, I think makes sense coming from him, given what we know about how he addresses the media. But yeah, I mean, I think at this point, like, I think the Kings have had the opportunities to improve the roster. And we're sort of getting to, like, I think we're almost beyond the point of like, they still can save it. Like, I don't know, you know, are they suddenly going to do a Cam Johnson trade, and is that suddenly going to make De'Aaron Fox want to stay? I don't really know. I kind of feel like the toothpaste might be out of the tube from that perspective, but I guess we'll see. We still have, you know, almost or a little bit more than a week until the deadline.
Chris Biderman of the Sacramento Bee spoke with De'Aaron Fox. You can read that story now at sacb.com. Chris live from his high-rise apartment in Philly. He confirmed that the Spurs were his preferred destination. Did you get the idea that that is his preferred destination just via trade, or that is where he would eventually like to land, whether it's in a trade now, in the summer, or in free agency?
Let me pull up the exact quote. He said he would prefer, like he said, everybody has a preferred destination. If they're not going to end up where they currently are, is basically what he said. So you know, like, He didn't. I didn't ask him whether that would be a trade or the hypothetical free agency scenario, but he basically made it very clear that, yeah, of course I have a preferred destination if it's not here, and I think everybody does. And then I asked him straight up, "Is it San Antonio?" And he said, "Well, that's what the reporting says." And I know James reported that yesterday, so he didn't refute it. So I definitely he had the opportunity to shoot that down, and he absolutely didn't. So I think that was sort of the theme of the interview. Maybe not what he said, but the fact that he was willing to go on the record and not refute anything. If you read between the lines, that says as much as anything else. So to me, that was my takeaway, is that, yeah, it's the Spurs. And if you're De'Aaron Fox, like, we know he's a small market guy, like, he doesn't love the spotlight. He wants organizational stability. The Spurs are certainly that, and he wants an opportunity to win. And what better player to potentially align yourself with long term than Victor Wembanyama? So I think it checks all those boxes for De'Aaron, and I think it would make a lot of sense for the Spurs as well. So it is kind of a natural pairing from that standpoint. And I would understand, given all that's happened in the last couple years, that De'Aaron would want to push that direction.
Yeah, like all of what you're saying makes perfect sense to me. I want to know, you're there with them. What is the mood like, and what are his teammates saying? Because this is like, I mean, you're a family, and now someone doesn't want to be part of the family anymore. And I know Doug is doing his best to keep this thing together, but just how shook is everybody by this news, and just what was your general feel around the team?
I mean, I was just at shoot around for, I don't know, 20 minutes, half an hour today, and everything seemed normal. Everything was, there were a lot of smiles. It all seemed sort of normal. My feel, I guess, for the locker room is that these guys will support De'Aaron and really anything he decides. I don't think, like, there's a clear difference between, I think, what's happening with De'Aaron now and what's happening in Miami with Jimmy Butler, right? Like, it's not like De'Aaron is being a malcontent. Like, if De'Aaron's still practicing, he's still playing. He hasn't requested a trade. He told me today he has not requested a trade. And so, De'Aaron's not being as detrimental to the team as it would seem Jimmy Butler is being in Miami right now. So it's not a scenario where it's like, this guy really wants out of here. It's a scenario where, De'Aaron wants what's best for his career, and I think everybody in that locker room respects that. So I haven't really sensed that De'Aaron's situation has led to, like, discontent or frustration in the locker room, and maybe that changes in the coming days. But for now, it's like being around the team, like, talking to guys about De'Aaron playing through injury and stuff, like, all of his teammates are really appreciative of that. There's the idea that De'Aaron should sit out and take some time to get healthy, and De'Aaron doesn't want to do that, and his teammates really appreciated that for him. I wrote about that after the Knicks game. So I feel like De'Aaron's in a relatively good space when it comes to the relationship with his teammates. But in terms of his relationship with the front office and the organization, I think that might be a little bit different.
Chris Biderman of the Sacramento Bee joining us now. He spoke with De'Aaron Fox. You can read the story at sacbee.com. So I guess so. We'll see De'Aaron playing then, at least up until he's traded. Which means if at some point De'Aaron sits out, that'll be the red flag. That'll be the cause for alarm.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
There's been no indication, and I asked him, like, where's your head at as a trade deadline comes? He's like, I'm going to keep doing my job, and he participated in shoot around today. There's no indication that he's not going to play tonight. So again, like, it's not Fox being a malcontent, at least from my standpoint. Like, I don't view this as it being as distracting as a scenario would be, like, if Fox were to, sit out and we find out he's a DNP for quote unquote personal reasons, which is happening elsewhere for, I guess Zach LaVine, maybe, right? Personal reasons he's sitting out. Like, we haven't gotten to that scenario yet with De'Aaron, and I'm not ruling it out. But for now, it looks like Fox is going to continue playing, whether he's in the Kings' long-term plans or not.
Chris, how do the Kings move forward from here? because this is like, I mean, he has been, they call him the head of the snake. They call him the franchise player. He's the guy on every single billboard. He's the guy. And this opens a door for other people to be the guy, whether it's Sabonis, whether it's Malik Monk, whatever. But like, how do you think they're all dealing with this, like, internally, and like, how do you move forward as a
Yeah,
group?
I mean, it seems like they're in a really difficult place because they have, it's been very clear that they're trying to make the playoffs this year, and it doesn't seem like, they have any appetite to pivot towards rebuilding. And I don't know how you do that, how you thread that needle of, all right, we're going to trade our star player and continue to try to get to the playoffs. Like, to me, and this is just me editorializing, but like, if you're trading star players, the best avenue towards getting to real legitimate substantial contention is drafting stars, and the best way to do that is to acquire as many draft picks as possible. And then, if a star does come available in a trade, maybe you can move those draft picks. But to get some role players and say, like, yeah, we want to remain in contention this year, that to me just, and again, this is just my opinion, but that to me is just the road towards mediocrity. And I don't know that the Kings would be best off in doing that. I think if you're going to trade De'Aaron Fox, and you're in a position where that's what you have to do, then to me it's try to load up on as many draft picks as possible and see if you can draft the next De'Aaron Fox, and have him under contract for a long time, and then build a foundation. The best way to win championships is to draft stars. That's just it. Like, there are very, very few team building scenarios in the history of the NBA where you win a championship without drafting at least one or two stars. So to me, if that's where, if I were running the Kings and I'm not, and I knew I had to trade De'Aaron Fox, I would look at it like, all right, this is time for a full rebuild. Maybe we're 2 years away, but let's get a bunch of draft picks. Let's see if we can draft some potential, the next De'Aaron Fox or the next whoever, and build contention that way. Because in a small market, that's really what you have to do. I think it's an incredibly difficult needle to thread to say we're going to trade our best player and still remain in contention for a playoff spot. I just don't know how that's feasible, to be honest.
The problem is if you're the front office and you make that trade and you want to go, okay, hey, we're going to tear it down for a rebuild, you're probably not going to be around for the rebuild.
Right,
probably,
which might
it's a really tough spot for everyone.
That might speak to a larger discussion about ownership and who's in charge and who's ultimately setting the direction of the franchise. Because, if there was a clear and coherent plan here, I think De'Aaron Fox would feel a lot more inclined to stay and, feel more inclined to sign a long-term contract to remain in Sacramento. But it doesn't feel like there's a coherent plan because there haven't been substantial improvements made to the roster, and there hasn't been organizational stability, obvious by the fact that they fired the head coach and nobody took accountability for it publicly. So to me, like, that all starts at the top with Vivek Ranadive and the team's top decision makers, because they're the ones in charge of setting the course for the franchise. And so far, it seems like De'Aaron Fox, or at least right now, it doesn't seem like De'Aaron Fox is in line with whatever course the franchise is on. And so that's how they got to this point.
Okay, Chris, we're joined by Chris Biderman from the Sacramento Bee here on
Good
the
reset.
Insiders, brought to you by Jiffy Lube.
Nice.
Thanks, Kyle.
Good reset.
Good reset. Look, this is a bad situation. And I think what complicates it even further is that we have 8 days until the trade deadline, and the Kings should be looking to get better. And at the same time, they're now looking like they might get worse. Can you get better and worse at the same time? Does this end all of the other pursuits that they're doing right now? Can you go get the players that you need in this trade that you would have traded for? Like, what does this mean for the Kings and the deadline? Because it just feels like it just dropped a bomb on everything.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm alluding to. It's like, what's the path of the organization now? If you're going to trade De'Aaron Fox, then I don't know how much sense it makes to go get Cam Johnson, right? Like, even if De'Aaron Fox is signaling, and all the indications are that Fox is not going to sign with the Kings long term, unless maybe something miraculous happens over the next week. But I think the Kings are clearly operating under the standpoint of they're not expecting Fox want to sign long-term with the Kings over the summer. So that's why they have made it clear that they're open to taking these calls. So, like, why give away your assets if you are going to need your assets to rebuild your team with maybe potentially with younger guys, right? Like, why go deal for Cam Johnson or John Collins if ultimately it's not going to make a difference whether you keep Fox or not? That's kind of why I think the toothpaste is out of the tube. Like, the Kings are kind of operating as if there's not really anything they can do right now that makes De'Aaron Fox want to stay. So if that's the case and you're Monty McNair, why would you deal assets when you might need assets? And to Kyle's point earlier, like, it also puts Monty McNair in a tough spot because we don't know if Monty McNair will be the one making those decisions down the line. So it is a messy situation, but again, like, it's messy from the Kings standpoint. I don't think it's messy from De'Aaron Fox's standpoint. I think it's pretty clear. Like, he feels like he's done right by the organization. He doesn't feel like the organization has done right by him. And he wants to thrive in the prime of his career, and he thinks he has a better chance to do that elsewhere.
Chris Biderman, Sacramento Bee, Kings in Philly tonight, then Oklahoma City, then Minnesota. Then they have a home game against Orlando at Golden One Center on February 5th. That is their last game before the trade deadline. When they take on the Blazers on Thursday night, February 6th, is De'Aaron Fox on the
team? I mean, I asked him, I was like, do you expect to be traded? And he said, I expect the unexpected. Anything can happen in this league, more or less. So yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of once Damian was putting out what he was putting out yesterday, and once Shams put out that report, I mean, to me, it's like knowing Clutch, knowing how they operate. Sometimes the reporting is a little bit slower than what's actually happening, if that makes sense. Like, the layers of the reporting are 2 or 3 layers behind the actual events. So to me, like, when it comes out that, the Kings are fielding offers, and like, it feels like to me that maybe Fox's camp is agitating pretty hard for a trade without demanding one, right? So yeah, I think it's more likely than not that Fox goes. But like Fox said, crazier things have happened. And again, he didn't rule out something happening that would keep him in Sacramento, but my read of it is that it seems unlikely.
It seems unlikely. I think that's where we're at. Yeah. Okay, so how do you go play a basketball game? Like, what do you expect to see from that Kings team tonight? They already had their first quarter woes. We all know that. But like, how do you walk out on the court and play a game with, 8 guys, and one of them doesn't want to be there, and one of them doesn't expect to be there?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think playing the game is probably the easy part. Like, it's going to be talking to the media and talking to family members and reading social media and all that. Like, that's probably the harder part for the players than just going out and hooping, right? Like, I think these guys like to hoop, and that's what they're best at, and that's what they'll go do. So I don't think that's particularly difficult, but it'll be difficult if and when Fox is traded, because you have all these guys trying to compete for a playoff spot. If and when Fox gets traded, you'll be bringing in new pieces that everyone will get acclimated to. And then, you'll try to do that and try to get back to playoff contention at the same time. Like, that to me is going to be more difficult than this sort of, I guess, holding pattern, purgatory, whatever you want to call it, they're in right now. But no, like, to me, I guarantee you, like, if you were to ask James, and this, if you were to ask Malik Monk, like, what do you got to do? We're going to go hoop. We're going to go try to win. Like, and that's more or less what Fox said today. So I think those guys are good at compartmentalizing that. I think it's all the other stuff that's more difficult when it comes to, when they have their phones in their face, as opposed to just playing basketball.
Chris, you've been super generous with your time. Thanks so much. Go enjoy your day in Philly and enjoy the game tonight. Kings 76ers out there in Philadelphia. Appreciate you, Chris.
And thanks for having me, guys. Thanks for being there. So we have this type of reporting.
No doubt.
Yeah. Thanks, appreciate it. Yeah. Thank my bosses.
Sacramento Bee, SacB.com. Chris Biderman, thanks so much, man. His exclusive interview with